Recent United Nations estimates shows that the entire global population sits at 7.9 billion, and with increasing population comes health problems faced by women during pregnancy and childbirth. This makes the need for family planning, gender equality, and maternal health a lot more important. Population discussions are now focusing on the push to solve it by shifting fertility rates through prioritizing the reproductive health and rights of all people. Kemi Balogun reports.
Issues surrounding fertility are taking center stage. The pandemic has reduced the efficiency of healthcare systems, particularly in the area of sexual and reproductive health. Disruptions in the supply of contraceptives in combinations with lockdowns are predicted to result in a sharp rise in population growth. The day comes with it the need to highlight the growing problems that come with a growing global population. With world resources depleting at an unsustainable rate, the issue of overpopulation is becoming a crucial issue for discourse at different events, with calls on how to manage it.
This impact of COVID-19 on sexual and reproductive health services will likely revert Africa and indeed Nigeria back to stage 2 of the demographic transition. The demographic transition schedule of high fertility and high mortality rates. The outcome, if unchecked, will have enormous immediate and long-term negative impact on our effort to moderate population growth, improve the standards of living and quality of life of all our citizens, even during the aftermath of the COVID-19.
Nigeria is at risk of a population explosion by 2050 that will result in a doubling of its current figure of 206 million to about 401 million. And experts in the fight to increase safe sexual and reproductive health practices want this to be tamed through informed partnership decisions.
It is past time to move away from talking about managing populations by telling women about their choices and which choices they should be making. The real conversation should be around how we can uphold everyone's right to their own choices.
Women cannot make reproductive choices on their own. It's a partnership. So the message is partnership, and what we have seen work is partner communication, couple communication, because it takes two to tango.
A UNFPA research done in March estimated that about 12 million women experienced disruptions to family planning services.
Well, Executive Director, Hazy Health Initiative, Rhoda Robinson, is in the studio with me to talk to us about this. Good morning, Rhoda. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast. You have been on the field with regards to issues like this, talking about reproductive health. Talk to us about the level of education when it comes to the use of contraceptives and the likes. When we're talking addressing population explosion, these are some of the issues. How educated, what you have seen on the field, are people? And from that report that we just played, we saw that women cannot necessarily take the decision on their own. How educated are their partners with regards to this as well?
Thank you very much. I think, as you said, reproductive health is one of the most important factors to consider when you're looking at population growth in relation to development as well. When you talk about women being able to make decisions on their own, or having that as a crucial factor in determining reproduction, it's important to note first that women need to be able to have agency to understand what those decisions are and how it affects their lives. Going back to your question of education, less than 60% of women actually have adequate information and access to modern contraceptives. And this brings you to the issues of them knowing what is good for their body, knowing what choices they can make, and where they can get these commodities or information from. And when you have a break in the flow of that kind of service, you find that most women are left with the few options that they have, which are usually unreliable and what they would necessarily not make for themselves if they had better information. Yeah.
So what really is the challenge here with them having that information? Are we not really getting to these people, or is funding a challenge also about getting to them? What really are the challenges?
I think if you look at global declarations,
Yes.
coming from ICPD, that's International Conference on Population and Development, to the Abuja Declaration on what we need to do to ensure that sexual and reproductive health and family planning access is achieved, you will find that we have not gotten to where we need to go to. For instance, when you're looking at funding on a national scale, it is recommended by WHO that your health funding should be at least 15%. Right now, Nigeria is operating on less than 5%, and this is the entire health budget. Now, when you look at that compared to what is shifted to family planning and contraceptive provision, you'll find that it is definitely not enough to educate women on what they need to do, educate families on the choices that they need to make, and provide the commodities that are necessary for them to make the decision. And you're only right now we're looking at formed families. We're looking at women who have stable partners. It's a completely different case when you're looking at adolescents and young people who are already sexually active but do not have that information and are not given that information or access to those kind of commodities.
Now, that's another big aspect
Yes,
that we need to focus on. But we have joining us via Zoom Chairman, NMA National Committee on Population and Demographics, Dr. Ejiro Iwaha. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Good morning. Nice to have me here. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much. Now, let's talk population explosion. In fact, recently, former President Olusegun Obasanjo raised concerns with regards to the geometric population explosion without corresponding socio-economic development. Help us better understand how the disproportion that we see between the population explosion and the resources we have, what the implications are. Perhaps we begin that conversation from there, then we understand how we need to address this.
Okay, thank you very much. The basic fact is, as it stands today, Nigeria has a population that is estimated at 211 million. And between men and the women, the percentages are almost 50-50. Now, if we do not guide this, and then if you even look at our socioeconomic status, the indices are very low. Unemployment rate is high. Even the children that are being born, infant mortality rate is high. If we look at the women that are giving birth, maternal mortality rate is high. So we find out that socio-economically, we are not prepared for a population explosion. And these also have their toll on the health system, or the health system has its toll. I'll speak from that perspective on this. How much healthcare services do we have available in the country? Our hospitals, except for maybe the tertiary institutions, a lot of the secondary healthcare system in the states, they're under the jurisdiction of the state. Several states are not doing well in terms of providing healthcare. So if we don't make this provision available, then we're not going to be able to cope with this rising trend. We're not going to be able to cope, and it's going to mean that we're going to have more out-of-school children that are going to be on the streets. We're going to have, because when parents cannot afford, the parents are unemployed, they can't provide for these children, and we have more children on the streets. We're going to have issues of yet increasing criminality because people are not doing anything, and they are just there's no plan for them as they're brought into the world. Yes.
But staying with you, Dr. Ejiro, we have seen countries like India and China address issues of population. I wonder why it is so difficult for us to borrow a leaf from these countries to our own benefit.
Well, yes, these countries had to take very radical decisions. But again, there was also when increased rates of infanticide, and then gender preferences. they get a baby girl and the parents quietly kill that child because there's a national regulation on how many children you should have. But I think for us in Nigeria, the focus should be on awareness. Awareness of the implications of an uncontrolled population. Like the NMA, as part of our celebration of this World Population Day, we were in churches yesterday, and you imagine somebody just rise up and tells you, Madam, please, can you tell me in the Bible, doctor, can you tell me in the Bible where God said we should do family planning? So it speaks to the level of ignorance and unawareness of opportunities that are available for regulating your family size. So awareness creation is one of the key things that we will have to focus on as a nation, and then provision of these commodities. With the challenge of COVID came the inability of several women to access family planning services. Also came with the issue of declining resources to provide these commodities. So I think for us as a nation, short of coming forth with a policy of you must have this number of children, is the fact that we have to put the enabling infrastructure on ground to ensure that women have access, to ensure that men also play their role. It takes two indeed to make a baby. Men also play their role, and the enemy was on a webinar yesterday trying to drive home this fact that men need to take more responsibility for family planning and for the right choices towards when and how to have more children, what the number to have. Men have a key role to play. A lot of the women are dependent on the decisions of the men in their lives. Over 84% of households, the NDHS study 2018 showed that over 84% of households are led by men.
All right.
And that speaks a lot, because if the man provides for her to go to hospital, provides for care, and if he's not in tune with these facts of being able to support the wife to take the right decisions, or the male partners supporting, then we have this issue of uncontrolled deaths continuing.
All right, let's bring the conversation back to the studio. Some persons will even say that the men should be the focus when you're talking about the use of contraceptives and all of it, looking at their build-up or their makeup, that they are the ones that should be, their attention should go to. But then let's look at what the government has said about a week ago. Government declared its readiness to scale up modern contraceptives to help good family planning, and is talking about introducing soon the methotrexate progesterone acetate. I'm sure you've heard that. Yes, because I'll cut my teeth making that pronunciation. But then how far would this go in reducing unintended pregnancies?
I think going by what Dr. Iwo had said as well, involving men in the discussion of family planning is extremely important, because our culture right now dictates that most of the time men make the decisions in the family, and this does not just stop with where the family goes to, but including the health facility, the health care that the women use as well. And if you look at that in relation to the World Population Reports for this year, it's not just in Nigeria, it's everywhere. A lot of women, less than 50% of women actually have the decision or can make the decision on where to access healthcare, what kind of contraceptive they can use, and if they should be using contraceptive, and even when to have sexual relations. So when you are able to balance the agency and the ability of a woman to make decisions on it by herself, and the contribution and the partnership of her partner, of the man in her life, it makes it easier for interventions and commodities to be accepted first and then used. And we also have to understand that most people do not understand the concept of why family planning or contraception is important. So you have to tie it to key development indices. When you have less children, you are able to provide more for the ones you have. When you have less children, you'll be able to spend less on healthcare and things, and be able to contribute.
You know what? How I believe in this part of the country, God will take care of them.
Exactly, and it's something that needs to change, and that's why working with religious leaders, traditional leaders, is very important, because these are the custodians of this belief. These are the ones that project what should happen. If you make them understand, and by the time you are pushing it to the communities, to the individuals themselves, it collaborates that idea and it helps them change for the better. Because we need to focus, as she said, on awareness and behavioral change, because we need them to go from a state of listening to a state of acting, not just hearing about contraceptive and how it can help or if it can help, but actually going further to look for information and look for this commodity and deciding which ones are good for them and their families.
So, are there contraceptives for men?
Yes, they are. The first and foremost is condom.
but then we don't seem to be pushing that narrative aside the condom you mentioned.
Yes, I think one of the major issues is that a lot of responsibility when it comes to reproduction is put on the woman.
Why?
She's the one that bears the child. She's the one that has to go through 9 months or more or less in carrying the child and taking care of it. She's the one that is decided as the homeowner, as the caregiver in the family. So most of the time, the responsibility is placed by society and by biology on the woman's table.
Shouldn't that be part of the narrative we need to begin to change at this point?
Yes, which is why it is important to ensure that women have that right to make decisions, because at the end of the day, it affects them more. Let me give you an example. Teenage pregnancy, if a boy and a girl happen to engage in sexual relations and she gets pregnant, most of the time the girl has to drop out of school. What happens? The boy usually just gets cut out of the picture. He abandons her, he continues with his life, and it doesn't really interrupt him if he is not the responsible type or if he doesn't have a responsible family. The woman, however, most of the time has to drop out, and then you have increased rates of girls dropping out of school. Even when they are done with giving birth, they have to still stay back and take care of the child, and the rate of which they might go back to school is really, really reduced.
So beyond religious centers, from what you have said now, we need to look into going to schools.
Exactly.
To educate.
You need to go to the communities, you need to go to where young people gather, because information is key. If they do not know, they cannot make the right decisions for themselves. So you have to tell them when, where, and why it is important. At my organization, we're actually working on a project on this, on giving young people the ability to look for that information, work towards getting it and pushing that right information to their different groups and sets where they gather and meet as well. And using available tools is also important. Social media is key. A lot of young people get their information from social media.
Absolutely.
Whether it is right or wrong, they don't really...
They just consume.
Exactly. So being able to push that information, being able to say that this is where you can get the right information. This is the kind of information that you need in order to make the right decision for yourself. And leaving it at just family planning does not really cut it anymore.
Yeah.
It has to go beyond family planning into life planning. How does this affect your future decisions? How does this affect where you see yourself in the next 5-10 years?
Absolutely. Let's get back to Dr. Iwoha now. Like I was asking earlier, the government a week ago said that it is ready to scale up modern contraceptives to help in good family planning and to tame the impending population explosion in Nigeria through the introduction of the Depo Medrozine progesterone acetate subcutaneous injection. And I am wondering, I was able to pronounce it, how far this would go in reducing unintended pregnancies.
Oh, thank you. That again is it's good. Scaling up means making it more available, more facilities. And it's the short-acting injectable, that's Depo. And then people can just walk in, get the injection, and walk away for free. So it's a positive one, scaling it up. But then it's one thing when we make pronouncements. Is another thing when we get to the facilities and see what is on ground. So beyond the pronouncements are walking the talk to ensure that when you say that these commodities will be provided, when the women get there, let them be able to access it. So I think it's a positive, because the government is showing concern, which is a step in the right direction. But beyond that, the $4.5 million that we hear is sent or is spent in purchasing commodities should impact on our facilities, the primary healthcare centers, the secondary health facilities, and the tertiary. But the concern, part of the gap that we have, is still this issue of health being not totally a federal government funded project. States also fund components of health. So the call also should go to states. We're making this advocacy to states to take more responsibility for purchase of products for their centers. And besides just purchasing this product, the oversight function of monitoring and evaluation to see that these products were purchased, they got to the facilities, and they're being utilized. They're not locked up in one state store where they stay and probably get expired, but there's a monitoring of the distribution and the usage. So those are key factors that will be able to drive this issue of population growth. And to add to that, the issue of male contraception, you spoke about it just in passing, but to say that beyond the condoms is what we call vasectomy. Vasectomy is a permanent sterilization method, a permanent contraceptive method for men. And yesterday in our discourse, we were able to identify that at some point, it's a matter of education. Men think that if they accept vasectomy, they're going to be unable to have a normal sexual life. But that's not correct. With vasectomy, men can still have a normal sexual life. The difference is they're not going to be able to release sperms that will impregnate their partner as they have intercourse. So that is just the difference. And indeed, we should be advocating more for this and making more men to know that they have a key responsibility. Because if a man has several spouses and is busy sharing and making them pregnant, then we're not going to address the population issue. So we are also driving that. And then to get this information through the general public, we'll be on several radio stations. Sending this message across that these contraceptives are available. They are not just for women, we have for men. Men should feel free to approach the centers. And I also want to quickly
because we need to wrap up.
Okay. I also want to quickly speak to the issue of adolescents and reproductive health. To see that we are advocating for facilities to ensure that they have youth-friendly centers in their hospitals, so that these young people don't just come to the general antenatal clinics and people start looking at them. What did he come here? What did she come here for?
All right, we'll have to leave the conversation there now. Thank you so much, Chairman, NMA National Committee on Population and Demographics, Dr. Ejiro Iwaha, for your time, as well as Hazy Health Initiative, Rhoda Robinson, Executive Director for Hazy Health. Thank you so much for your time on the program.